this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. There are not too many things in this old world that I can hold forth on as an expert. But there is one area that I'm very proud of, and it has absolutely nothing, and I mean nothing, to do with forensics. You know what it is? It's being a grandparent. As a matter of fact, I think that, for me at least, it's been one of those journeys that has been quite easy and quite pleasurable to become an expert at. There's nothing, I don't think, in this whole world, except for maybe my wife, that brings me more joy than being around my grandbabies. I love it. And you know, the problem with loving being around your grandbabies is that you always want to seem benevolent. You don't want to, be the one that is stern any longer. Those days are past for you. I love when my grandkids climb up on my lap, and I love it when they say, "Can we go to the donut shop?" I say, "Of course. Not only can we can go tomorrow as well. As long as you're here, we'll go every morning. And darling, you can get anything you want." That's the benefit, or one of the benefits, of being a grandparent. But sometimes families are an absolute train wreck. There's no denying that. And the grandparent, many times, has to step in. And no matter what their life was like before, with their kids, they have to take on the mantle of, once again, being a parent. And many times that ends with a brutal lesson. Now, we're going to talk about one such case today, about a granddaughter who received assistance from her grandmother, along with the granddaughter's boyfriend. And it ended in the death of a benevolent lady. Coming to you from the beautiful campus of Jacksonville State University, I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. I loved hanging out at my grandma's house, Dave. Couldn't help it. Loved it. And it's because my mother was very hardworking. She worked outside of the home. And so when I was little, I would be with my grandmother, and of course, anything I wanted, including trips to TG&Y. You remember TG&Y?
Wow. Yeah, I do. Wow.
Walking up and down the toy
So
aisle.
funny.
It was just part of it. Went to the grocery every day with her,
Right. So you had the typical,
cooked.
you had the grandpa thing going on when you were little, so that there was a difference between mom and dad and grandma and grandpa.
Yeah.
I grew up the same way. But you know what? My grandpa, and I think about this now, especially when I'm with my oldest grandson, Braylon, because I can do things my grandfather couldn't do, but he still looks at me like I'm an old guy. And I don't feel like an old guy, okay? But today we're actually going to talk about the nightmare scenario of grandma stepping in, as you mentioned, and becoming the primary caregiver to a now 17-year-old granddaughter. This is a granddaughter, now not a daughter. Now, grandma is 61 years old, and she has been raising her grandchild for her life. They live in the same house and everything else. But as many teenagers want to do, they can fall off to the side and go a little wacky with the wrong. We always love to blame the wrong crowd. I oftentimes wondered if I was the ringleader of that crowd, if I was the one that do not let her around him, that kind of thing. But anyway, that is the scenario that we're dealing with. Grandma raises grandchild. And I will tell you this, my daughter, Hannah, when she had Braylon, having him very young, she was so hyper intense about not allowing me to be the to step in and take the place of her. She wanted to make sure my job to be the mom. It's your job to be the grandpa. You be the grandpa. She didn't. He was 2.5, 3 years old before she even let him go to the grocery store with me. Actually, our first trip was to Home Depot, where he actually went with me by himself to Home Depot. And I'm not kidding. That's how protective she was of her motherhood and her responsibility. Seems like that's a rare occurrence nowadays when some of our young people have children. They tend to drop said child off on Granny and Papa. And Granny and Papa don't get to experience what you and I get to experience, being Granny or Papa. That is a wonderful thing to be. It is. You can't beat it, man. You can't.
No, you can't. I can say that I can truly die fulfilled man in that sense. It's just, it's when we choose to have these kids, and which is more often than not. And you have that opportunity, but when you're forced back into a role that at some point in time, you thought, well, those days are over with for me. And listen, life happens. You never know, what's waiting for you around any one corner. You have to have somebody that's going to step in as a surrogate. And listen, I think that many times it's probably better for the kids to be with a grandparent as opposed to being pushed off on the state and they be fostered and all those sorts of things. And not that there's anything wrong with foster parents. Yeah. God bless them and what they do. However, it wasn't that many generations ago that the grandparents still lived in the house with their children as they grew older, and the grandkids would grow up around them. It's just many times that the parents are missing. Now that element is missing, and it's very sad, and you never know what kind of damage is going to be done. And we've had a lot of stories like this, Dave, where we've had grandchildren that have turned on grandparents, and the grandchildren are afflicted with something. Who knows? There's a laundry list of things they can be afflicted with. But unfortunately, many times these afflictions wind up with a grandparent paying the ultimate price, which is their life. And that's the tragedy of all of this, is that you live a long life. You try to be a decent person, along the way. You try to be benevolent, right? And many times that dog will bite your hand and rip it off. And I think that that's probably what has, in fact, happened with Tammy King here, who is the subject of our story today.
Well, in this scenario where Tammy King is the victim, 61-year-old grandma who raises her granddaughter, Tara King. In this story, there is no mention of Tara King's biological mother and father. I spent a little bit of time trying to find out, and I thought that's not the subject. I blame a lot of people for a lot of problems. Mom and dad are usually the cause of most of them. And when you relegate responsibility of raising your child to somebody else, it's on you. So Tara King is the granddaughter, but Tara King is 17 years old, Joe. At 17, you're old enough to know what's going on in your world and what's going on around you. And you're old enough to have a boyfriend, as Tara did. Her boyfriend is a guy named Uriah Urick. Uriah Urick. He's 18. He's a year older than she is. And Tara King is having problems with her grandma because Tammy King wants Tara to go to school and finish school. And Tara just doesn't want to go. Doesn't want to go to school. And, by the way, she wants Uriah to be able to spend the night at the house. He's over there a lot. She wants him to spend the night. And Grandma is saying, no, you need to go to school. And he's too loud. Tammy's boyfriend, she's not married, she's dating. And Tammy's boyfriend said that the reason she didn't particularly care for Uriah is he was too loud. Now, I don't know exactly what that means because I'm the loud person. So I don't know what what loud means because I know I am. I guess if it's worse than me, bless your heart. But that was why Tammy didn't particularly care for Uriah. I kind of think, though, it might have been related to consumption of alcohol and drugs, probably drugs.
And there's hints of this throughout this story that there is not just, and we're not talking about somebody sitting around smoking weed. All right.
No.
We're talking pretty heavy duty, serious drugs. As a matter of fact, the drug dealer for this young couple, comes into play in the story in a significant way. And, whenever I hear drug dealer, I'm thinking, well, yeah, that's the one-on-one contact that they have. Say, for instance, in this couple, how many other people are potentially involved or in this individual's grasp or reach? And this individual is older than them. The subject, I think
20
he's in
years almost.
Yeah. He's up in his 30s, if I'm not mistaken.
He's
and
37 now.
What kind of influence can he have? Because he's actually, I guess he's the cool guy, in this story. And of course, Grandma she wants peace in her house. I want peace in my house. I know that you want peace in your house. And if you've got some stranger that, by the way, your granddaughter is begging that he be allowed to come into her home and spend the night, what's the story with that? Why would you put that on your grandma to make that decision? She has her own home that she's earned at this point in time in her life. She's 61 years old, there in Galveston County, Texas. Why should she allow this individual to have access not just to her home, but also to her granddaughter? Because her granddaughter is still not of age. She's 17 years old. So that's almost, can you imagine, Dave? That's almost like insult to injury. Not only do I want to be involved in your granddaughter's life, I want to be involved in her life, in your home, under your roof. And I'm not going to respect you. I'm going to be loud. I'm going to do whatever in the hell it is that I want to do. I wonder why it was that they chose to be at Tammy's home as opposed to this kid's home. Why didn't they go to his house? Why was it? What was so great about Tammy's house? Did his parents or parent, did they not allow him to do things at his home that he thought that he could get away with at Tammy? And I got to tell you, Dave, this winds up, I think the crux of the story is it winds up in uber violence here.
You've mentioned the key players. We have 61-year-old Tammy King. She's the victim. We have our two suspects, Tara King, 17-year-old granddaughter, and her boyfriend, 18-year-old Uriah Urick. And then we have 36-year-old Travis Hodge, who is the known drug dealer. Okay? He's the guy that everybody knows. You need meth? That's where you go. Guns? That's the guy. He's your connection. So those are our players. And what we do start with, a welfare check. Neighbors hadn't seen Tammy King for a couple of days, and they were used to seeing King around, and they didn't see her. So, hey, in a neighborhood, people know what's going on pretty much. I mean, not the ins and outs of everybody's world, but when you're used to seeing somebody and all of a sudden you don't see them and you don't see other activity, it does bring up that, hey, maybe we should do something here. And so you got two choices. You can go knock on the door, intrude, or call and, hey, do a welfare check, would you? And that way, police show up. We're just checking to make sure, okay, that's all we're doing, Mrs. King. A friend was concerned. And that's what they did. But when police got there, Joseph Scott Morgan, things were not good. This welfare check turned out in the worst way possible. They walk in the door, and it's been ransacked. The house is empty. There's nobody else in there. Nobody's answering the, hey, sheriff's department, make yourself known. Nobody's making themselves known, Joe. And they look around, and the place, there's a difference between a mess and a ransacked home.
Yep.
For those of us who have been victim of a home robbery, the ransacking is different than a mess. I had this twice in my life, and
that's one of the things that we have to contend with at scenes, and people don't think about that. There are some people that live their lives in a state of dishevelment, if you will, where you've got crap, laying all over the place. Clothes aren't put away. They're not folded. The bed is never made. It's in disarray. You might have clothing piled up on a dresser somewhere. There's dirty dishes in the sink. And for an investigator, one of the difficult things that you have to do when you go into a dwelling like this is try to understand where, what is, normal and what's abnormal. Like, is this the standard way in which they conduct themselves day to day? Do they leave piles of dirty clothes around, because, if you're talking about something being ransacked, most of the time with an individual that goes into a home and they begin to, and I've seen where this happens, where they'll literally destroy furniture. I've seen drawers that have been pulled out and tossed across the room.
Wow.
And, Dave, I found in a couple of these cases where they're trying to mask something,
mm-hmm.
I have found that many times the ransacking goes over the top in order to paint this picture, to kind of sell it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, wow.
Like, well, they'll break items up that probably, wouldn't, there would be, if you're trying to imitate, say, a burglary gone wrong, why would you break furniture? Because it's not necessarily like, why would you break a coffee table? We'll put it to you that way, or an end table. Or why would you, I walked into one house one time where a toilet had been torn away from the floor.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's so over the top that one or two things is going on. Either they're trying to mask what they're doing, or this person was psychotic that went in there and just began to, to try to destroy the environment. But I think that a true pro, right? Somebody that's a true professional thief is not going to do that. They're not going to go in. If they're going to ransack something and pull out drawers, they're only going to do those things that are necessary for them to get what they need, So you couple that with, say, an unkempt environment, and you're a stranger to this if you're an investigator. And that's a major line that you have to draw to try to understand what is it that is going to separate filth from pure evil. Now, Dave, my understanding is that if you were going to, in fact, rob someone, Tammy King would probably be at the top of your list, because the investigation has revealed that this is not some person that didn't have means. She had a bounty of items inside of her house, including, now get this is kind of interesting, a 61-year-old woman. She's got rare weapons. That was one of the things that popped up in the descriptor. So it's one thing if you've got, your grandpappy's old squirrel gun, but when they start talking about rare weapons, what exactly does that mean? Well, they're not very clear about it, but rare weapons can produce one thing other than violence. They can produce money, because if you have a weapon that you can sell to somebody that might have an interest in it, and no legitimate weapons collector is going to buy a weapon from somebody that's a known drug dealer, and certainly not from a teenager, because that you don't move around. I've been in the atmosphere with people that do, in fact, collect rare weapons. These are not individuals that are kind of fly by night. They're very thoughtful about what they do. They see this as an investment, and you're going to have to provide the necessary paperwork. You're going to have to authenticate, and you're going to have to go to, the provenance of the weapon in order to demonstrate, my Lord, not only do you have 1, 2, 3, you got 5 weapons here, or whatever the number it is. How did you come across these? Because I move in these circles. I've never seen you before. I've never seen you. And so you have somebody that shows up with this, and it's not just weapons, Dave. From what I understand, there was a considerable amount of cash found at the house as well. Or she had been known to have a considerable amount of cash.
And, that was the part that I'm so glad you pointed that out, because, they've been kind of cagey in reporting on some of this. Whenever reporting on an incident talks about safes, plural, gun safes, that indicates to me that we're past, and you've got a senior citizen. Well, 61 is not a senior citizen, but you've got a 61-year-old woman head of the household here. It's not like we have locked up our hunting guns, or our Civil War reenactment stuff. They're guns that are kept for a reason. So when they use the plural of safe, that tells me that these mean something and probably are valuable. We know there's cash and jewelry that is in this house that is also being kept in safes. They even referred to it as a lockbox and things like that are in the home.
There was one thing here that I wanted to point out. We've talked about that there's evidence that the house has been ransacked. Another term I like to use that doesn't get used enough is the term of rifling. We hear about rifling as it goes to forensics. We talk about ballistics and we talk about rifling and all that. Mm-hmm. But I love the term rifling. That's an old term, where people are going through papers and all that sort of stuff, and they're rifling through it, and they'll throw things about. And then you have ransacking, which I always think means bigger pieces, and they're destroying them and breaking them apart. I love language, man, as you can tell. I'm not real good at it, but I love language. I love listening to people that know what they're talking about when they use good language. And I just screwed that comment up. So there you go. You can pillory me over that. But one thing that we don't need to get away from here, Dave, is that Tammy, when she is found in her home, and this is a big, big piece here, Tammy is found nude.
Right.
And she lives with her 17-year-old granddaughter, and her 17-year-old granddaughter has allowed an 18-year-old man. You're 18, you got to sign up for the draft, right, Bubba?
Yeah, buddy. 18.
He's allowed to be in this house. Well, 61-year-old grandma going to be naked, all right? Mm-hmm. And granted, she's covered with a sheet. That's another part to this.
I was going to ask you about that. That was something that was interesting.
Yeah. The fact that she's unclothed underneath that sheet is significant. I've often thought two things relative to anytime, particularly females, anytime I'd go out on a scene and they're absent clothing, I think they're being sexualized in some way. Okay. I think that kind of goes about saying it. You can catch people unaware and they're not going to have clothes on, but why else would she not have her garments on? Okay. It can be either through sexualization, or I think that there is a bit of humiliation going on. It's kind of like the dream that people have where they wake up and they're in front of a big crowd and, or they're in the midst of a dream rather, and they're teaching, like, mm-hmm. I've had that dream before, actually, where I was completely laid bare, before a crowd of people, and I'm teaching, I'm naked. And other than people, in my dream throwing up at the view of me naked and their eyes beginning to bleed. It's a scary proposition, for someone to be in that position. So I'm wondering, was she compelled? Think about this. Was she compelled to take her clothing off? Was it used as a point of leverage with this woman? So that she can be humiliated, debased, whatever the case might be. I don't know. For all I know, she sleeps nude, and she happened to be awakened. I guess that could happen. But there's something about the fact that she's nude. And then, of course, this goes to the old, that one bit of investigative information we always look at, no pun intended coming up, that the body is covered so that they cannot look at them. Mm-hmm. And, that goes to things like face covering, where many times, because if the person has value, if the person does not have value to you, okay, mm-hmm. why are you going to take the trouble to cover the body?
Right.
They mean nothing to you. They're nothing but a means to an end. And so you've got her lying there on the floor, completely nude. I think that that's certainly something I know from me in practice. If I walked into a house and I had someone who was covered with a sheet, and I look around at the cops that are there, the EMTs that are there, the firefighters, say, "Hey, did you get a sheet off your truck and cover the body?" And they say, "No, we didn't." Did the finder that came into the house, maybe in another case, did they feel horrible about this person being naked and they went and grabbed a sheet? Because that does happen.
Right.
There's people that grab blankets out of cars at car accidents, and you've got people laying there and they don't have to be nude. They'll cover the body just out of respect.
Right.
But in a home, you've got a 61-year-old female that is lying on the floor without a stitch of clothes on her, and someone takes a sheet and covers the body. So, with the face covering, most of the time, face covering and also the rest of the body, you feel shame. You feel shame for what maybe you've done. You're familiar with the individual. They say that specific face covering, because, not all people, close their eyes in death. Matter of fact, Dave, I've had the deaths that I've worked, I've had more people with their eyes open than closed over the years. And some cases would give me, I don't know what they call it, the willies.
Yeah.
And there are those cases, and I would literally take my gloved hand and close the eyes because I didn't want their eyes staring back at me.
Right.
And I'm a total stranger. How much more so if you're related to them, Dave?
Well, this case, because a welfare check leads to finding a 61-year-old woman nude in her own bedroom on the floor with a gunshot wound to the head.
Yeah.
The home's ransacked, and the granddaughter who lives in the home with her is gone. Her boyfriend is also gone. So it was pretty soon that, based on physical evidence of what they had, and by talking to others involved, they had persons of interest within the first 24 hours. It's the granddaughter and her boyfriend. They already had that going on. So February 5th, they find the body. By February 6th, they're looking for Tara and her boyfriend, Urick, right? So they talked to, and this is the interesting part of all this, because investigations work like you have the physical evidence there on the scene. Then you have interviews with relatives and people, friends close to the perpetrator or the victims, all of them. You want to find out what's going on. You've got a dead person. Was this person evil? Was she the type of person who terrorized her granddaughter? And, they're trying to find out what really happened. And what they find out is that, well, apparently the 18-year-old boyfriend here, he uses methamphetamine on a regular basis and has for a while. According to his stepfather, he's violent tendencies. And when the police, well, do you think he could kill? Oh, absolutely. So when somebody close to you says, oh, yeah, Dave could kill, without a doubt. Yeah, he could have done this. That immediately says, okay, what else do we know? Well, we do know that Tammy King, according to Uriah Urick's mother, Tara King hated Tammy. She hated the woman who raised her. And that hate grew when Tammy King would not allow Uriah Urick to spend the night. That was the breaking point for Tara, apparently. Now, I'm going to tell you that in the mind of a teenager, some things can be that breaking point, but I got a feeling, Joe, there was a lot going on in that relationship with drug, sex, rock and roll. You've got this Bonnie and Clyde mentality. So it appears to me, just from the outside looking in. I'm thinking about the home was ransacked because they were trying to make it look like a robbery. And because they went over the top, as you mentioned, that probably was also a tip to police going, yeah, this isn't. They knew right where to go for the cash. Somebody knew where that lockbox with cash was. That had to have been somebody inside. And so we've got that going on, right out of the gate.
Well, here's the other thing, too. I'm just having to think about this just a second ago. I'm really wondering, going back to her unclothed status. Let's take this piece by piece. We think about, okay, well, who would have knowledge that she would have a large amount of cash, coins, which I think she did, and exotic weapons.
Right.
Well, somebody that's in her intimate circle. Well, I can't imagine in any universe where you would give over the codes to multiple, because we're not talking about one safe, we're talking about multiple safes, and they're all open. Could that be a point of leverage for taking her clothes off and humiliating her? Just think about that just for a second. You take, strip down, and you're laid naked. You're bare before the world at this point in time. We want the codes. And if you're so drug addled in your mind, if you've got this kind of demon of meth that's, kind of raging through your veins and in your brain, you'll say and do anything. But this I do know. What did happen was that not only was Tammy robbed of her life, and not only were her possessions taken, but each one of those possessions had a pathway indicated straight to the killer. I can't get the smell of burning flesh out of my nose. That is what the boyfriend, this 18-year-old, Urick, had actually commented on. He told someone that he couldn't get the smell of burning flesh out of his nose. And I had to think about this because, I'd kind of been following this case. I've got friends that were in the media that were at the courthouse that were covering it. And I had to think back, was her body burned? Well, I don't think the body was burned. The only thing I can think of is that as the trigger on a weapon is actuated and you're in a closed space, you've got that propellant, some people refer to it as gunpowder, but the propellant burning off, and you'll have this acrid odor that will arise in the air. And maybe that's being associated by this individual with burning flesh. I don't know. But that smell would linger in the air, and it was interpreted, I think, as flesh being on fire. Now, what we do have, and you've heard, Dave, I'm sure, the term powder burns. That's a very confusing term for many people. Yeah. There is one of the things that was really cool about being in the military when I was very young. If you went out to the firing range, and I guess they still do this, I don't know, but if you go to the firing range, the armory will literally give you X amount of live ammunition to go to the firing range to qualify with. And generally you're out there all day long. And at night, they do something called the Mad Minute. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. I saw it on multiple occasions, and it's where everybody's lined up on the firing line, and you've got people out there with, back in my day, the original M16s, shoulder-fired rifle, and they're all lying prone on their belly, and they're firing, and you have to burn up all the ammunition. You can't take it back with you. And so you would see at night, you'd see these muzzles, blowing out flame out of the end of them. We had, back in my day, they had M60s still back then. You had the Maudus, which was the 50 cal, and all these weapons would be going off at the same time. These streaks of fire, not just the tracers going down range, but you see the muzzle flashes. And from a forensic standpoint, you understand the amount of heat that is generated with that. So if you fire a weapon and strike somebody with it, there is a bit of searing that goes along with that. If the victim is within range of that. So I don't know if he perhaps smelled this as he's pulling the trigger and he's ending her life. There is, and interested, one of the reasons I made mention of the M16 is that the only caliber weapon that is really mentioned in this story is 5.56. Now, 5.56 is millimeter. That's actually the same round that it's a NATO round. It's the round that most of our weapons were platformed in. So the civilian version of that is .223 caliber, which that's an imperial measurement. So caliber is imperial. 5.56, which is roughly the same thing, is in millimeters. So he's talking about 5.56. And Urick also mentions the fact that, or asks a question, I can't remember, but he talks about the shredding of flesh with this message. Round. What would a 5.56 do?
They were just so y'all know, this case, from the moment her body was found until now, it has been the fastest time from from an actual murder to a trial I've ever seen, Joe. This took place in February of this year. We are now only in November. We're doing this show in 2025. Could hear this 3 years from now, but we're talking months here. And at trial, they were sharing text messages because the prosecution wants to show, hey man, this isn't something that just started as a granny slapped her, her granddaughter, and it escalated into a fight that led to her death. And it was, oh my gosh, what did we do? This was planned out for a long time, for at least several weeks. Text messages that they showed in court included exchanges between the teenage couple discussing kidnapping and killing Tammy. Okay. Kidnapping, not just murder, Joe, but they plan to kidnap and kill her and rob her of all of her money and firearms. And they also had plans to pretend that Tammy, the victim, was abusing both of them. Prosecution pointed out a very specific message, Joseph Scott Morgan. In an attempt to prove that the murder was premeditated, the two teens wrote that they had ammunition that would, quote, shred through skin.
Yeah.
And that they planned to kill her at 4. They also wrote, we ride at dawn, meaning they planned to kill her at 4 a.m. And as the sun's coming up, they're on down the road. That was their plan.
Well, I got to tell you, I love Ron White, the comedian. Always have, always will. And, he's from Texas, and he had a famous quote, you were talking about the amount of time. And, of course, he was talking about capital punishment when he said this, said, come to Texas. And we've got an express lane. And so, I was shocked too when I read this. I was thinking, wow, this is pure. It's either Texas or Florida, one of the two, right. Because of the fact that this thing has been adjudicated so quickly. It almost makes your head spin when you look at other cases where, that we would cover. There's some cases out there that you and I have wanted to cover, but they have yet to be adjudicated, and they've been sitting on the books for 3 years. Right. And they have true forensic value, that we would like to explore, but those cases are out there, and it just moves at such a slow pace. But this thing, oh my Lord, they had all of the electronic data, and then not to mention these two actually gave the drug dealer, this fellow, this 30, how old is he, Dave?
37.
Like 37 years old, gave him 2 of the weapons that they stole, one of which was the weapon used in the commission of a homicide.
Yep.
And he was subsequently charged and convicted as well. And that was, for hindering an investigation, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, just to give you an idea of how people think, okay, they got to the point where we ride at dawn, okay, this romantic kind of thing they were doing. But when they got to planning their getaway, they didn't really have it planned. And so while they did kill, and they didn't have a real way of going wherever they needed to go. So they contacted a number of people asking, can you get us to Laredo? We want to go into Mexico. We need to get out of town. Now, when you're telling people, hey, her grandma just died and we need to get out of town, you're telling them right off the bat, something. And most people are going to say, I'm not helping. Sorry, that could be trouble for me. The only person who's going to do that is a drug dealer, because Well, that's how much money you got. I got $1,000 cash and a couple of guns. Okay, hop in. And that's what they did. And when they stopped the drug dealer, because by the way, if you think for a minute, your drug dealer is your buddy and your friend, he's not. And when he gets pulled over and they're going to find drugs on him because, well, he's a drug dealer. They're going to find baggies on him because, well, he's a drug dealer. They're going to find a digital scale on him. Why? Because he's a drug dealer. And when they're sitting there going, hey, Billy Bob, why do we have all this? Well, I just gave these two kids that I think killed her grandma a ride to Laredo. Now, let me tell you, here's a map of where I dropped them off. That's how this all goes down, Joe. And that's what they did. They used social media, telling people they needed a place to stay. Before anybody knew Grandma was dead, they're asking friends on social media, not people they knew, friends on social media. Hey, got a place we can crash? Why can't you stay at your grandma's? Oh, I don't know. This is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it is absolutely ridiculous that you would go to these great lengths. And we're talking about planning that appears to have taken place over the course of at least over a month, Dave, where they've been contemplating this. They had to figure out a way to get their hands on all these valuables if they were going to try to, go see the countryside after they ended Grandma's life, and to be able to sustain themselves. But how do you get to that point and you haven't planned a manner in which to get away? Go to the bus station, go to the train station, do anything that you need to do to get out and then walk across the border. I don't know. Why is it that you're going to leave this kind of a footprint behind and let everybody in the world know? This 18-year-old is actually bragging about this. He's talking about this, and you used the term just a few moments ago, this kind of romanticized vision that he had. Well, now, his romanticized vision is going to take place, from within the walls of Texas State Penitentiary. I don't know if he's in Huntsville, but that's probably where he will wind up if he's not there yet. And it's going to be a long, hard road for him, moving forward. He really didn't think this out, and also if he had a problem with meth, he's not going to have a problem anymore, because I know that you can get drugs in prison. Meth might be one of the more difficult drugs to get. Maybe he can get his hands on it. But his life has just become precipitously more difficult along the way. But the one thing I know is that a grandmother who may have had problems, I don't know if she did or not. I know that she did not deserve to wind up naked on the floor with a 5.56 millimeter defect in her head. She's gone. Any benevolence that she might have afforded anyone else in her life, that opportunity is now gone. And all that is left in the wake is horror, selfishness, and hell. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.